What I'd like to go through today with you is composition. Now, composition is the practice of putting things in your image that are going to make the image more attractive and more pleasant and more balanced to look at. Now, some of the rules that I'm going to go through with you, some of them are very basic rules, some of them are a little bit more advanced. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish with the 9 golden rules that we used to teach our photographers when we had the portrait studio for 20 years. Now, let's get started. So, understanding composition. The things we're going to run through today are the rule of thirds, leading lines, framing, the golden ratio or the Fibonacci sequence, and then we're going to finish off with the 9 golden rules. Let's start with the rule of thirds. This is probably the most common rule that most people know, and it's even on your phone. Now, the reason it's the one rule that most people know is because it is so effective. And essentially what it is, it's to put a grid over your image that is 9 squares. So there's a line at the bottom third, a line at the top third, line at the left third, line at the right third, giving you 9 squares. Now, once you look at an image and then you put that rule of thirds on top, you'll see here, she's in the right-hand third, the building's in the left-hand third. And essentially what the rule is saying is if you put the things of interest along those lines or at their point of intersect, the image becomes more balanced. So she's here in the right-hand third, but because there's negative space over here and that building in the left-hand third, the image seems to be more balanced. Here's another example of it. Tim here is in the left-hand third, and the camera is in the right-hand third. It's balanced. Here's an image of the city I shot a few years ago. Now, let's put the rule of thirds over it. Have a look at how the things within the image line up in those lines or at their point of intersect. So here we've got leading lines into the point of interest, which is there. Okay? That building is on that third. That building is on that third. The tops of the buildings is give or take along that top third line. Let's move to leading lines. Now, leading lines essentially says that there are elements within your image that lead your eye to the points of interest. For example, let's look at the cityscape again. Here's another shot of the cityscape. Our main point of interest is the skyline there. But these lines here, 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 and here lead your eye to that point of interest. Here's another example of leading lines that aren't street lights. This is hands. Here's the monkey's hand and this lady's hand. The main point of interest is what's going on over here. So these lines lead you to that point of interest. Here's another example of leading lines, but with a shallow depth of field. So when you look at this image, your eye is led through the image by that leading line to go through the image, but it's stopped by this shallow depth of field. So this gravestone is what the point of interest is and where the viewer is taken to look at that image. Framing. Framing is the practice of framing something within your image to lead the viewer's attention to that point of interest. For example, we shot something for a bone broth company and she's obviously selling bone broth and that's the point of interest in all of her images. So we've chosen to use a darker skinned girl to hold the bowl against a white background so it frames her product in the best way possible. Here it is again, we've got a monkey, but the framing is a little bit more subtle. It's these twigs, okay? And everything is leading you to this point of interest. It's almost like a vignetting effect to lead you to that point of interest, the monkey. Here is another part. So the point of interest is the moon, but we're framed by these trees and the balcony and even the horizon. So framing really allows you to be able to say, okay, well, my point of interest is the moon. How do I put the moon in such a way and frame everything around the moon that leads more interest to the moon in this particular image? The next rule I want to teach you is the golden spiral, or the Fibonacci sequence. This is probably the coolest of the rules I'm going to teach you today, and probably the most advanced. Now, when you look at it, it seems very complicated, but the maths is really easy. All you do is you take the number where you were at and add it to the number previous. For example, 1 plus 1 equals 2. 2 plus 1 equals 3. So you'll see that this is a 3 by 3 square. 2 plus 3 equals 5, or a 5 by 5 square. 5 plus 3 is 8, or an 8 by 8 square. 5 plus 8, 13, and so on, giving you this spiral. Now this spiral has existed in nature and the galaxy, in plants, and on snails. Da Vinci used it when he painted the Mona Lisa. Hokusai used it in the 1800s when he painted the Great Wave. Da Vinci used it again. We used it for this bone broth company. So if I put the Fibonacci sequence, you'll see that this line leads you through all the points of interest, or the things that support this bone broth. Noodles, chopsticks, garlic, soup spoon. The watch company used it. Right? Here it is. So we've put that espresso very deliberately there and angled things in such a way that your point of interest and your eyes are led through the scene to then sit and focus on the watches. Okay? This was the bone broth company again. Now, I'm going to move on to the 9 golden rules. Now, before we moved into this studio, we had a studio in Kensington and we were there for 20 years. And in that studio, we had a portrait business. Now, in the 20 years that we owned that business, we trained a lot of photographers. And essentially, when you're in a portrait studio environment, the idea is that people come in and you want to be able to sell them images. That's the whole business. You're trying to sell images. Now, if our photographers came in and decided to shoot whatever it is they wanted, I couldn't set up a business or a system that was replicatable. So we created a set of 9 golden rules that all they needed to do was follow these 9 golden rules to be able to create more sellable images for our business. These are the rules. Use a tripod. Keep it tight. Do not amputate. Stay below the eye line. Keep the horizon straight. Check your exposure. 70 millimeters or above. Rule of thirds. Pose dynamic. Now, it's not always practical to use a tripod in every single application, but when you can, it's advised that you do so. Let me give you an example. So, here's a corporate headshot or a corporate profile I shot, and if I go through these rules, you'll see that I've hit every single one. Use a tripod. The camera was absolutely on a tripod because we shot 30 or 40 different people that day, and every single one of them had to have the same exact background. So, set the camera on a tripod allows us to be able to do that. Keep it tight. And what keep it tight means is the distance between her arm here and the edge of the frame is not so big and not so tight, right? Again, from the top of her head to the edge of the frame, it's tight, but the image still is balanced. It's not amputated. We're shot below her eye line. The horizon is straight. So is the vertical. The exposure is good. 70 millimeters above. Now, 70 millimeters or above allows you to be able to take advantage of something called compression. When you're using a longer lens, your image or the subjects within your image are going to be compressed. I don't know anybody who wants to be photographed and be expanded. They want to be compressed a bit. So using 70 millimeters or above allows you to be able to take advantage of that with your lenses. So, rule of thirds. She is in the right-hand third of the image, and the building is in the left-hand third as well as the negative space. Okay? Pose dynamic. She's standing there. She's as dynamic as she can be for standing on her own, right? In a corporate situation. Here's another corporate shot. This is a group. Again, it's on a tripod. It's as tight as it's going to be. We haven't amputated anybody. The eye line is right. The horizon is straight. The exposure is good. This, unfortunately, could not be shot at 70 millimeters or above because we're in a tight room. This is shot at 50 millimeters, right? The rule of thirds, the horizon is there. It's balanced. Everything is where it needs to be. Pose dynamic. Every single person is doing their own thing, but it's cohesive as a corporate group. Now, I'm going to move to what happens when you break these rules. Now, in all the photographers that we hired, some of them didn't quite work out. Here's an example of one who didn't, or who needed a lot of training. Now, she's shot this really wide. No family is going to buy a picture when you've got a picture of the air conditioner and the photographer's lighting in the background. Okay, no one's going to buy that. So that image really needs to be cropped like this for it to be a sellable image. Now, immediately once I've done that, it's a lot more appealing, right? It's now much tighter. The eye line is better. The exposure could be better. It's a bit hot on the child's face and mum's in the shadow. It is what it is. Let's move to the next image. This one here, she's amputated the child's head. So this is what happens when you break these rules. Okay? The exposure's still not great on this baby's face. Okay? Mum's been asked to move away from dad, so that works better, but this is still too hot. Okay? So you've got to follow these rules. This just looks like an accident rather than something that the photographer has gone out of their way to capture. Now, they've looked through the eyepiece and decided, yes, this is the right time to push the button. This is not the right time to push the button. The horizon is not straight. Everybody isn't centered in the image in such a way that the image feels tight. The balance seems off. This is what happens when you break these rules. The image is unsellable. Now, yes, you can crop it. Yes, you can crop it, and it works a little bit better. But are you a photographer or are you a retoucher? If you're a photographer, then you would compose that image right from the get-go, and then you've created a sellable image right there and then without needing to spend hours of time retouching 100 images for this family. Okay? Again, we've got our air conditioner. It's not tight. And in an image like this, you really want to sort of chop off mum's thighs a little bit because it's going to be more flattering for her and she's going to love you for it. Okay? Last one. Here. Again, the photographer has looked through the eyepiece and seen that and decided to push the button. Exposure's wrong. I can see all the lighting in the background is there. Baby's foot is amputated. Like, this image needs to be shot there. And the exposure needs to be much, much, much better, right? This is what happens when you break these rules. Now, they're the 9 golden rules. Write them down, follow them. Learn these rules of composition because it will help you. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes second nature. And when it becomes second nature to you, you immediately pick up your camera and you go, okay, horizon is straight. My vertical is straight. I'm keeping it tight. Push the button. You will end up with a lot less images that you need to eliminate. And that gives you and your clients more options. And then hopefully that gives you more product or photos that you can then sell. I hope that's been educational. I hope that's been helpful for you. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you on the next one.